Most people with student loans are doing it completely wrong. They're throwing money at their debt thinking they're being responsible, but they're actually costing themselves thousands of dollars and years of their life. I'm about to show you why the advice you've been given is probably backwards, and more importantly, what you should actually be doing instead. What if I told you that aggressively paying off your student loans could be one of the biggest financial mistakes you'll ever make? Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly how to handle your student debt in a way that actually builds wealth instead of just making you feel good. Let me start with something that's going to sound controversial. Your student loan is probably the cheapest money you'll ever borrow in your entire life. Think about it. Most federal student loans right now are sitting between 4 and 6% interest. Your car loan? Probably 7 to 10%. Your credit card? 18 to 25%. A personal loan? Even higher. But here's where people mess up. They treat all debt the same way. They think debt equals bad, so they want it gone as fast as possible. That emotional reaction is costing them a fortune. Here's what actually happens in real life. Sarah graduates with $40,000 in student loans at 5% interest. She gets a job making $55,000 a year. She's motivated, she's responsible, she wants to be debt-free. So she throws every extra dollar at those loans. She skips contributing to her company's retirement plan that matches 50 cents on every dollar. She doesn't build an emergency fund. She puts nothing into investments. 3 years later, her loans are paid off, and she feels amazing. Except she's broke. She has no savings. She missed out on $15,000 in free retirement money from her employer. And she lost 3 years of compound growth in the market. Sarah did everything society told her to do, and she's actually worse off financially. Now let me show you what smart people do differently. They understand something called opportunity cost. Every dollar you put toward your student loan is a dollar you can't put somewhere else. If your loan is at 5% interest and you can earn 8% in the stock market, you're actually losing 3% by paying off the loan early. But it gets even better than that. Student loan interest is tax deductible up to $2,500 per year. So that 5% interest? It's really more like 3.7% after taxes if you're in the 25% tax bracket. Now you're losing even more by paying it off early. But before you think I'm telling you to just ignore your loans and invest everything, hold on. There's a system to this, and if you do it wrong, you'll end up in an even worse position. The first thing you need to understand is the difference between good debt and bad debt. Good debt is low interest, tax deductible, and finances something that increases in value or earning power. Bad debt is high interest, not tax deductible, and finances things that decrease in value. Your student loan? If it helped you get a degree that increased your income, that's good debt. Your credit card balance from spring break? That's terrible debt. Here's the framework that actually works. Step 1, and this is non-negotiable, get your employer match on retirement contributions. If your company matches up to 3% and you're not taking it, you're literally turning down free money. That match is an instant 100% return. There is no investment on earth that beats that. Not paying off your loan, not the stock market, nothing. If you're skipping this to pay extra on your loans, you're making a massive mistake. Step 2, build a small emergency fund. I'm not talking about 6 months of expenses right now. Start with just $1,000. Maybe $2,000 if that makes you sleep better at night. This is your oh crap fund for when your car breaks down or your laptop dies. Without this, the first emergency that hits will go straight on a credit card at 20% interest, and now you've just created a much bigger problem. Your student loan at 5% looks pretty good compared to credit card debt at 20%. Step 3, and this is where it gets interesting, pay the minimum on your federal student loans and attack any private loans or high-interest debt like your life depends on it. Why? Federal loans have protections. If you lose your job, you can get forbearance or deferment. You can switch to income-driven repayment plans. If you work in public service, you might qualify for loan forgiveness after 10 years. Private loans? They have none of that. They're like credit cards with slightly better interest rates. Kill those first. Now here's something most people don't know. Federal student loans have something called income-driven repayment plans. These plans cap your monthly payment at 10 to 15% of your discretionary income. And here's the kicker. After 20 to 25 years of payments, whatever's left gets forgiven. Yes, you'll pay taxes on the forgiven amount, but for people with massive loan balances and lower incomes, this can be a game changer. But you have to recertify every year, And if you miss that deadline, you get kicked off the plan and your payment skyrockets. Most people have no idea this even exists. Let me tell you about the biggest scam in the student loan industry. Refinancing companies are spending millions on advertising right now, telling you to refinance your federal loans to get a lower interest rate. Sounds great, right? Lower interest means less money paid over time. Except here's what they don't tell you. The second you refinance a federal loan with a private company, you lose every single federal protection. No more income-driven repayment. No more loan forgiveness programs. No more forbearance if you lose your job. You're trading flexible, protected debt for rigid, unforgiving debt just to save 1 or 2% on interest. For some people with high incomes and stable jobs, this might make sense. But for most people, it's a trap. Now let's talk about the psychological part. Because this is where people really get tripped up. Debt feels heavy. It feels like a weight on your chest. And there's something emotionally satisfying about watching that balance go down to zero. I get it. But feelings aren't a financial strategy. The wealthy don't make money decisions based on how they feel. They make decisions based on math and opportunity. If paying off your loan early makes you feel good, but costs you $50,000 in lost investment growth over 30 years, was it worth it? Here's a thought experiment. Imagine you paid off your $40,000 loan. You're debt-free. Congratulations. Now imagine the next day, someone offers to loan you $40,000 at 5% interest, and you can invest it in a diversified portfolio that historically returns 8 to 10%. Would you take that loan? Most people say no because they just got rid of their debt and they don't want to go back into debt. But mathematically, it's the exact same situation you were in before. The only difference is your emotional state. You're letting feelings override logic, and that's expensive. But here's where I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit. Not everyone should follow the same strategy. If you have $30,000 in student loans at 4% interest, and you're making $200,000 a year, honestly, just pay them off. The mental bandwidth you'll free up is worth more than the few $1,000s you might gain by optimizing. But if you're making $60,000 a year with $80,000 in loans, you need to play this game smart or you'll be broke for a decade. There's also the interest rate threshold to consider. If your loans are above 7%, especially private loans above 7%, you should probably prioritize paying those down after you get your employer match and emergency fund. At 7%, the guaranteed return of paying off debt starts to compete with the average expected return from investing. Above 7%, paying off debt becomes more attractive from a pure number standpoint. Let me give you the exact system that works for most people. Pay minimums on all federal loans. Get your full employer retirement match. Build $1,000 to $2,000 emergency fund. Attack any private student loans or credit card debt with everything you've got. Once high-interest debt is gone, increase your emergency fund to 3 months of expenses. Then split extra money between retirement, investing, and additional loan payments based on your interest rates. If your loans are under 5%, put more toward investing. If they're above 6%, put more toward loans. If they're right in the middle, split it 50-50. Now here's something that's going to blow your mind about loan forgiveness. If you work for a government agency, a nonprofit, or certain public service jobs, you might qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Here's how it works. You make 120 qualifying payments. That's 10 years, while working full-time for a qualifying employer, and your remaining loan balance gets forgiven tax-free. Sounds amazing, right? Here's the problem. 99% of people who apply get denied. Why? Because they didn't have the right loan type, they weren't on the right repayment plan, their employer didn't qualify, or they didn't submit the right paperwork. The program is a bureaucratic nightmare. But if you do it correctly, it can save you tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here's the strategy almost nobody talks about. If you're going for public service loan forgiveness, you want to pay as little as possible for those 10 years because whatever's left gets forgiven. So you'd pick the income-driven repayment plan with the lowest monthly payment, and you'd put all your extra money into retirement accounts and investments instead of your loans. This is the opposite of what feels right, but it's the mathematically correct move. You're essentially gaming the system in a completely legal way. Let's talk about the biggest mistake I see people make. They get a bonus at work, a tax refund, maybe an inheritance, and they immediately throw it at their student loans. They feel responsible. They feel like they're making progress. But they just missed an opportunity. That lump sum could have gone into a Roth IRA where it grows tax-free forever. It could have been invested when the market was down. It could have been used to increase their emergency fund so they don't have to use credit cards next time something breaks. Once you send that money to your loan servicer, it's gone. You can't get it back. But if you invest it, you still have access to it if you really need it. Here's something that might make you angry. The government and loan servicers actually don't want you to understand how student loans work. They make more money when you're confused and overwhelmed. They send you confusing statements. They make it hard to understand what repayment plan you're on. They don't tell you about consolidation options or forgiveness programs. Why? Because if you knew how to optimize your loans, they'd make less money. The system is designed to keep you paying as much as possible for as long as possible. Now let's talk about what happens if you actually can't afford your payments. This is where people panic and make terrible decisions. They stop paying, their loans go into default, their credit gets destroyed, and they spend years recovering. Here's what you should do instead. Contact your loan servicer immediately. If you have federal loans, request deferment or forbearance. You can pause your payments for up to 3 years without defaulting. Or switch to an income-driven repayment plan where your payment could be as low as $0 if your income is low enough. $0 payments still count toward loan forgiveness if you're on the right plan. You're keeping your loans in good standing without actually paying anything. Private loans are trickier because they don't have these protections. But most private lenders would rather work with you than send your loan to collections. Call them. Explain your situation. Ask about hardship programs. The worst they can say is no, but most of the time, they'll lower your payment temporarily or reduce your interest rate. They want their money, and they know they won't get it if you default. Here's the final piece that ties everything together. Your student loan should be one small part of your overall financial strategy, not the center of it. Too many people put their entire life on hold because of their loans. They don't invest, they don't save, they don't take career risks, they don't enjoy their 20s. Then they wake up at 35, debt-free but broke, with no retirement savings and a decade of lost opportunities. Don't let that be you. The smartest move is to treat your student loan like a monthly bill, not like a crisis. Pay what you owe, optimize where you can, but don't sacrifice your financial future just to get a zero balance. That zero balance doesn't build wealth. Investments build wealth. Assets build wealth. Compound growth builds wealth. Your student loan is just the cost of your education. And if that education increased your earning power, it was worth every penny even if it takes you 20 years to pay it off. Here's what nobody tells you. The person who pays off their student loans in 3 years and the person who pays them off over 20 years can both end up wealthy. The difference isn't the loan, it's what they did with all the other money while they had the loan. The person who paid it off in 3 years better have an incredible investment strategy for years 4 through 20, or they just wasted their financial prime. The person paying over 20 years better be investing the difference, or they're just being lazy with their money. Your student loan is not your enemy. High-interest debt is your enemy. Not investing is your enemy. Not understanding how money works is your enemy. Your student loan is just a tool, and like any tool, it can be used wisely or poorly. You're the one who decides which it'll be. Stop thinking about being debt-free and start thinking about being wealthy. Those are not the same thing, and confusing them is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make.